The United States government, the executive branch. The executive branch is controlled by the president. Here are many examples of many different presidents throughout the United States. The executive branch powers are listed in Article 2, and the main duty is to enforce the laws. The executive branch includes the president, the vice president, and the president's cabinet, which we will get to later. Qualifications to be the president or vice president must be at least 35 years of age, born in the United States, and be a resident for 14 years. Terms. The 22nd Amendment limits the president to 2 terms or 10 years. Very important. 22nd Amendment limits the president to 2 terms or 10 years. Salary. Here are the things that the president gets. Powers and limitations of the president. His role as the chief of state, the ceremonial head of the United States government and people. He is also the chief executive. He enforces federal law, treaties, and court decisions. He can impose executive orders, and he appoints cabinet members, commissions, and federal judges. But what is really important is this right here, that the Senate must approve the president's appointments. That is where we see the checks and balances from the other branches. The powers and limitations of the president. As chief administrator, he employs more than 2.7 million civilians and spends more than $2.5 trillion a year. As chief diplomat, he is in charge of foreign policy, appoints ambassadors, executive agreements, and negotiates treaties among other countries. Recognition of foreign governments, which the Senate must approve, and must approve the treaties by 2/3 vote. Another example of checks and balances where the president just can't sign a treaty. He must have the approval of the Senate through a 2/3 vote. We also see he's the commander-in-chief. He's a civilian authority over the military, which is roughly 1.4 million people, including the reserves. The War Powers Resolution of 1973, and then Congress declares war. The president cannot just declare war. It has to be from Congress. Once again, another check and balances example. He is also the chief legislator. He has the power to veto. He has the power to outline legislative proposals, i.e. the federal budget, and call special sessions of Congress. 2/3, both houses of Congress can override a veto, checks and balances again, and Congress is not obligated to pass the president's proposals, checks and balances once again. He is also the head of a political party. The current president being the head of the Democratic political party. He's a chief citizen. He represents all of the people. He has certain moral obligations to uphold. But we have to talk about the federal bureaucracy. This is very important. These are agencies and people and procedures through which the federal government operates. This means by which the government makes and administers public policy. And the Constitution makes the president the chief administrator of the federal bureaucracy. And the Constitution is relatively silent on the organization of that executive branch. Therefore, it is left up to the president and the Senate. The executive office of the president was established in 1939 and changed by each administration since. As we see, the inner circle of the president consists of his chief of staff, his press secretary, and physician and counselors. The executive office of the president is the National Security Council. The Office of Homeland Security work closely with the president on security issues such as the CIA, military chiefs, National Security Agency, etc. We also have the Office of Management and Budget, Office of National Drug Control Policy, Science and Technology, and Trade, Economy, and the Environment. The executive departments or cabinets were formed in 1789, and they created 3. But today there are 15. And each department is headed by a secretary, except the Department of Justice, who is headed by the Attorney General. Choosing department leaders is nominated by the president, but yet they have to be confirmed by the Senate. Party patronage, campaign influence, and professional qualifications must be tied into this, along with regional balance and interest group pressure. An example of this would be living in the South and having the NRA be your interest group pressure. Independent agencies, there's more than 150 of them, and they consist of the cabinet and not the president. Some do not fit into departments, and Congress wanted them independent to escape influence, such as I just talked about. Some of these include the Federal Trade Commission, Social Security Administration, the Peace Corps, the United States Postal Service, and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, often called the FDIC. How do we choose candidates? Through primary elections, where each state conducts an election to determine the delegates to the National Convention and who the preferred candidate is. First primary is held in New Hampshire, and the first caucus is held in Iowa. National conventions are where each state's primary election gather in one location, and they determine the number of delegates. Republicans have 2,059, Democrats have 4,353. At the convention, the president and vice president candidates are chosen by majority. These various factions and the leading personalities of the party come together, and it is created and adopted. The Electoral College is very important. This is the group of people, the electors, chosen from each state and Washington, D.C. to formally elect the president and vice president. Why? Public ignorance and apathy. Electors are people chosen by the political parties at their state party. They may be state elected officials, party leaders, etc. We have primary elections, political party conventions, and then the general election, which is held on the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. Voters cast ballots for all electors representing a particular party in each state. Inauguration day is January 20th. You must have 270 out of the 538 electoral votes to become president. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, The Social Contract. I was born a citizen of a free state and a member of its sovereign body. And however weak may be the influence of my voice in public affairs, my right to vote on them suffices to impose on me the duty of studying them. Basically, my right to vote is very important, and it basically lets me out of being controlled by a government, because we are born free citizens of a free state. Voter registration. You must be a citizen of the U.S., resident of the state in which you are voting, and 18 years of age, and you must be registered. This now concludes our podcast of the executive branch.